For the past 3 weeks, my mornings have been completely transformed thanks to YESOUL Treadmill. Every morning, I hop on my YESOUL Treadmill, and it's become the most convenient part of my morning routine. It's quiet, it's compact, and it lets me customize my own workouts from a light workout to a more intense jog or run. To get started, scan the QR code located to download the app. Once downloaded, you're going to open up the app and you'll see the YESOUL logo. Click the plus sign to register your equipment. Tap the equipment of choice and get started to connect and add the equipment. Wait for Wi-Fi. Successfully connected to the Wi-Fi, you want to go back to the home screen and select your program. Select the program of choice and then select start. Connect interface of choice to project the screen and continue on with your workout. Starting my day with YESOUL means I'm energized and ready to take on anything. I love that I don't have to waste time walking to the gym or waiting for equipment. If you're ready to take control of your fitness routine, I've got you covered. Use my code O888A at the checkout for your special $100 discount on your very own YESOUL equipment. Why wait for the perfect time? Start your fitness journey today. Shop now at YESOULFitness.com and use my code O888A for your exclusive discount. Alafia! My name is Oshun. On this channel, we uncover the creepiest, most unusual haunted TikToks the internet has to offer for entertainment purposes. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the Soul Trap for your weekly dose of supernatural, coming to you every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursdays, baby. Okay? Y'all are my Soul Trap. Trap is with a Y because the Y is for you. And that's because I love you so freaking much. Y'all remember that song, Jesse Powell's song back in the day? This song's dedicated to my Soul Trap. Okay? And with that being said, baby, today's shout out goes to It's Me 8076. She said, I would love a shout out one day if I ever get so lucky. Love you, lots, boo. Oh, thank you. I love you too. It is me 8076. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your support. Absolutely. I appreciate all of you guys. Please continue to show me that love. Please continue to comment in the comment, honey. I was about to say in the description. You can't comment in the description. But anyway, y'all already know what time it is, so let's get to this video.
As I'm sitting here trying to find another horror Thanksgiving story to share with you guys, I actually remembered one that happened while I worked at the hospital. As most of you guys know, I used to work at a
Happy
trauma
holidays!
center, which is where a lot of my earlier stories come from. Because being around so much death and just so much sadness, you do experience a lot. This story took place on Thanksgiving night. I was working a 6:30 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. At about 8 p.m. we get a trauma that comes in, and it was a young girl, probably about 17 to 18 years old. She unfortunately did not make it. So the story goes, she had spent Thanksgiving with her mom, her mom's boyfriend, and the rest of the family. It was the end of the night and everybody was packing up all the leftovers and just kind of putting things away. The girl was sitting there cutting up the turkey and putting it in like containers to put in the fridge, when her mom and her mom's boyfriend got into a heated argument. The girl, of course, being that it was her mom, gets in between of it and wants to defend her mom and get this boyfriend to leave her mom alone. The argument escalates and the mom's boyfriend pulls out and shoots the girl point blank. They call 911, they get her to the hospital, but as you guys know, she did not make it. But this is the part that I'll never forget. When they brought the girl in, she had a big chunk of like turkey in her hand. She passed away gripping this chunk of turkey, being that she was in the process of cutting up turkey when she passed away.
Ew. I mean, sad. Sorry, not ew.
Too afraid to reveal. As Maria hung up the phone, she heard it again, a scratching sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It sent a chill down her spine, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. This time it seemed to be coming from inside the walls, whispers, soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. They seemed to be calling out to her, beckoning her to come closer, faint, indistinct, but definitely there.
My husband accidentally roofied me on our first Thanksgiving together, and this is that story. First, I'll say it wasn't Rohypnol and it wasn't intentional, so let's get that out of the way. When I met my husband, I was 37 and he was 46, so he was 9 years older than I was. So he had 4 grown children and 2 grandchildren, and I had never been married before. So when Thanksgiving rolled around, his oldest daughter, she had to go to her mom's house and her dad's house and then our house. And I finally called all the parents and I'm like, look, if y'all can behave for a few hours, we can do Thanksgiving in our house and it'll be great. So the list grew to 35 people. Wow. And I was freaking out. I cleaned for days. I cooked for days. I took it all upon myself instead of doing a potluck, which we do now. So the day rolls around, I'm getting everything together. I'd had I think a glass or 2 of wine, and my hip was killing me just from having just done so much over the last few days. So I asked my husband to bring me an Advil or Tylenol or whatever I'd asked for. And so he comes in the kitchen, he's like, oh, here, take this. I'm like, okay. The next thing I know, I wake up and everybody's gone. Everybody. So what I should say to y'all first is I am a big old lightweight when it comes to meds. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm a lightweight. So I wake up and absolutely everyone is gone.
Well, what did he get?
I was mortified, absolutely mortified. It's like, oh my God. So Christmas comes around and it was at his ex-wife's house. And I'm like, oh my God, what did you all think? And they're like, that you fit in. Okay.
They're all some druggies and alkies. Hey queens, tired of feeling stuck and overworked? Check out the video on my website and see if digital marketing may be your way out. Hope to hear from you soon.
Is a Thanksgiving ghost story that helped solve a 190-year-old murder mystery. Every year on Thanksgiving, Bill and Frank Watson's grandpa, who was also a railroad worker, told them the story about 57 Irish railroad workers who had lost their lives supposedly during the cholera epidemic in 1852. The ghost story was, in 1909, a man was walking home from the tavern when he was walking past an area known as Duffy's Cut. This was an area, it was a railroad site in Pennsylvania. And when the man walked past Duffy's Cut, he saw all of these green spirits dancing around this certain area. And the man was able to identify the green lights, the green spirits, as the Irish railroad workers who had lost their lives during the cholera epidemic. These Irish railroad workers were all put into a mass grave, and the lights were specifically dancing over the trench where the mass grave was. After Bill and Frank Watson reached adulthood and their grandpa passed away, they inherited his papers. And in one of the documents, there was a paper that said X marks the spot, and Bill and Frank were pretty sure that that was where it was believed that these 57 Irish workers were buried. So they started digging. They started digging in 2002, and initially they found forks and pipe shards, which is actually pretty weird back then because in the 19th century, these Irish workers would not have discarded items such as these, at least not so haphazardly. In 2009, they finally found a bone that indicated that cholera may not
not have been what unalived these Irish workers. They found a skull that had a bullet hole in it as well as dents from a hatchet. And also when they found the coffins, each coffin had over 100 nails in it. Needless to say, excavations in the area known as Duffy's Cut have been ongoing. Not to mention, one of the skulls also had a divot in it, meaning that the person had to have been hit on the head before they were unalived. And it looks like that the average age of the 57 Irish workers was about 22 years old. And there was a lot of xenophobia happening during this time. Now, it's undetermined whether all 57 of the Irish workers were actually unalived in this brutal way. It does stand to reason that it may be more than likely. And had it not been for Bill and Frank Watson's grandfather telling this story every year and leaving those papers behind, these 57 Irish workers may never have been discovered and their names would not have been mentioned. And who knows, I mean, maybe they wouldn't have been able to rest in peace. So keep telling your ghost stories. They may actually help solve cases.
Okay. Okay. And them breathing sounds was making it even scarier.
Scary things that happened on Thanksgiving. Let's talk about the tragic case of Janet Erie. It was Thanksgiving in 2004, and Janet was preparing a turkey dinner. She was alone preparing the dinner while her daughter was at her friend's house. A couple hours passed by, and her daughter wondered why she hadn't heard from her mom. When she returned home, she found her mom brutally murdered. Now, what was weird is that there was no sign of forced entry, and there was barely any clues at the crime scene. Just Janet's body and the turkey in the oven. Eventually, police arrested a man named Danny Case. Danny had been seen going door to door the night before. He was arrested in 2005, and police thought, okay, case closed, he had done it. Until similar murders kept happening in the area. To this day, this is still a cold case. The murder was never caught, and police don't know what to think. Follow me on YouTube for more spooky content. Also, happy Thanksgiving.
Lindsay Ivan, go follow her, period.
Pilgrims. Uncle Teddy is obsessed with alien abductions, which makes Thanksgiving fun. He found a way to jam the subject into an entirely different conversation. I was talking about how good the zucchini was, and Mia said she grew it in her backyard, and the lights went on under his bushy brows. I was in my backyard when it happened. He began. You sure were, I thought, unfortunately already familiar with the story. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. He continued. Yeah, I bet it was. I twirled my mashed potatoes. He recounted the story, loudly, to a chorus of groans from the rest of the family. He gave a play-by-play recap of blinding lights, chrome spaceships, and, of course, sharp probes. The aliens had razor-sharp teeth, voracious appetites, mind control powers, and could shape-shift into horrifying creatures. They berated him with questions and threats until they finally dropped him back in his bed. Around the table, eyes rolled, and someone turned up the volume for the football game, louder and louder until everyone's attention was back on the television. Uncle Teddy gave up in a huff, folding his arms across his chest, obviously feeling there was more to tell. What do you think they wanted? I asked him quietly, so that just he could hear. He hit the table emphatically, making the plates shake. To study me, of course. Then, you know, probably take over the world. I nodded, deciding to indulge him. Why you? I ask myself that. Uncle Teddy said, nodding sagely. Did you change afterwards? Become a better person? I asked, chewing thoughtfully and reaching for the yams. What kind of question is that? Uncle Teddy huffed. What were you doing in your backyard, in the middle of the night? I helped myself to another few servings of turkey. They lured me out there, he said, matter-of-factly. Oh, okay, so you weren't, like, spying on your neighbor taking a shower and jerking off or anything. You didn't do that for years until you couldn't crawl into the bushes anymore. I said through a bite of mashed potatoes. He went pale. Of course not. He adjusted his glasses so vigorously that they fell off and into his gravy. He wiped them on a napkin with shaking hands. How could you even ask that? Maybe there's still time, you know, to be a better person. I continued, undeterred, buttering another 2 rolls. Before they come back to take over the world. What do you mean? Uncle Teddy looked ready to lose his dinner. Well, the abductions didn't really seem to have an effect on people. I guess they would try something else to shape things up before they settle in. I held Uncle Teddy's gaze, carefully picking at food stuck between my canines, wondering if he realized he didn't recognize me from last Thanksgiving. He stood with shaking legs, heading for the door. I was just messing with him, of course. There was no time.
That nigga was guilty of something, clearly. If it was all a joke on that end, but he was like, hold up, what you know, bitch? Man, oh man, oh man. He needs to be investigated.
It was a rainy Thanksgiving. We have a small family, so our family gatherings are tiny. It was my mom, my 2 sisters, our grandparents, and I for dinner at my mom's house. My older sister Nancy has been moved out for years. My younger sister Jamie and I still live at home with our mom. Our grandparents live 20 minutes away. Our dad's side of the family all live in a different town. We were all helping out with cooking and such, and our grandma was bringing over some food as well. We always do Thanksgiving dinner at 6 o'clock sharp. Our grandparents arrived at like 5 o'clock. We had to go out and help them walk through the rain up the front stoop to make sure they didn't slip. It was really bad out. Once they were here, we put the football game on in the living room, and I sat with my grandparents and watched football with my grandpa, who's a big Cowboys fan. My sisters were in the kitchen helping my mom with the food. The rainstorm created for a more comfortable and relaxing Thanksgiving evening. That is, at first. When it was time to set the table, I went to help. We were all at the table by 6 o'clock as per the usual. We had a giant selection of food for the small amount of people we were. Turkey, leg of lamb, potatoes, stuffing, corn, cranberry sauce, cornbread, and more food I'm probably forgetting. We were all at the table eating, drinking wine, and talking before we migrated to the living room, where there we all watched the football game. Then, sometime before the game ended, the doorbell rang. It was still pouring outside, and we weren't expecting anyone else. Our mom said, "Oh no, what if that's your father?" Long story short, our parents don't speak, but the idea of our father coming to surprise us wasn't impossible. My mom told me to go check who it was, so I went to the door and yelled through it, "Who is it?" But the sound of the pouring rain on the front awning drowned out the sound of a male's voice on the other side. So I opened the door, with the storm door still closed and locked. There was a black man on the other side of the door. He was in some really big rain jacket with the hood up. When I opened the door, he walked closer and yelled something through the door. I had to ask him to repeat it twice before I understood him to be asking for food, saying he's hungry. Then he said something along the lines of, "The Lord will give you good karma if you spare some food." I said 1 second. I went to the living room and told my mom there's a possible homeless or just very hungry man asking for food at the front door. My mom said close the door, while my grandma said give him some food. I said I'll make a little paper plate of food for him from the leftovers. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bunch of paper plates to account for the rain outside ruining them, and then sandwiched some of the leftovers together with them. Then I went to the front door where the guy was still standing. I held up the plate to show him, and he tried opening the door. I yelled, "Wait, it's locked." But I already was wary now after he tried opening the door. Regrettably, I still unlocked the door, and the second I started to push it open, he pulled it open with force and tried pushing his way through me. I instantly threw the food and held him back, yelling for my sisters to come help me. As Nancy came to help shut the door, I saw 2 more guys rushing up the front walkway to the door. I managed to push the man out enough to clear the door, and I helped my sister slam it shut. The second it was locked, I ran to the backyard door to make sure it was locked. I was the only able-bodied man in the house, and I felt like it was on me to protect the house. My family was in hysterics as we were brainstorming what to do. Not so shockingly, we settled for calling the police. My mom called while I kept going from window to window looking outside. It was hard to see out through the pouring rain, but through the backyard window, I saw a couple men running through the grass to the back door. I'd imagine they tried opening the back door and failed, and then I saw them running through the grass again back to the gate. Then they were gone. When the police got here, the food that I dropped onto the front stoop was still just sitting there, all scattered on the porch. Not that it wasn't obvious that those guys didn't come for the food, but it's something worth mentioning. Our Thanksgiving was almost turned into a complete nightmare if it weren't for my and my sister's quick reactions. I know my grandma had her heart in the right place, wanting to help the seemingly needy, and I was influenced by her. But unfortunately, we live in a world where sometimes trying to do the right thing could bite you in the ass. We installed the doorbell camera soon after this.
Child, oh my gosh, makes so much sense. Okay, I know y'all be in the comments cussing me out like, girl, you shouldn't do this, you people, da-da-da-da-da. I just, I used to live like that, see the bed and everything, and, act negative about everything and the worst that could happen. Now I see, like, what's the best that can happen? You gotta try to see good in things for the good in your life to have. Like, I don't know, it just makes sense to me. Everybody's not bad. Every rich, successful person is not evil. Anyway, next video.
Happened around the Thanksgiving of 2022. I was going through a divorce from my husband at the time. We'll call him Thomas. We'd been together for a little over 12 years by then. Our marriage started out well, but unfortunately we were still living in the same house until the divorce was finalized. Thomas refused to leave until it was finished, so I was unable to evict him from the house due to state laws. It was a pretty miserable situation, and uncomfortable as hell at home. It got to the point where I always felt sick. Really, it had been bad for the past few years. It was a nightmare being married to Thomas. He had completely changed from the man I met all those years ago into a total control freak. He was emotionally and physically and he had extreme anger issues. If he didn't get his way, he would completely flip out like a toddler. Out of nowhere, he would start screaming and yelling and throwing things.
Thomas, do you mind cleaning up after yourself?
Shut up! You can't say that to me! This is my house! When you start getting down on your knees more often, then we'll talk! You hear me?
Ladies, I know. Situations can occur and it can be difficult, but I'm telling you now, you have it in you to fight. Period. I don't care how small you are. I don't care how big you are. You can fight. You always, always, always have the choice to fight. Keep a paper trail. Take pictures and photos of bruises and destruction. And you have to press charges. And you have to follow through with those charges. And you have to put them in jail. And you have to start over. You have to make your own money. You have to fight. You can do it. Okay?
It was Thanksgiving night, November 28th, a chilly Thursday in Los Angeles. My name is Nicole, and like many families across the city, we were gathered around the dining table, enjoying the warm glow of family and food. The smell of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie filled our house, blending with laughter and clinking dishes. My mom had outdone herself this year. Her stuffing was perfect, and even my picky little brother, Max, couldn't stop eating. Dad was telling one of his usual jokes mid-sentence when the loud knocking shattered the moment. It wasn't a polite knock, but heavy and urgent, rattling the front door. Everyone froze. We weren't expecting anyone. My dad frowned, setting down his fork. Mom whispered, "Who could that be at this hour?" "I'll get it," Dad said, pushing back his chair. My little brother Max watched wide-eyed from his spot next to me. I remember holding my breath as Dad walked toward the door. When he opened it, there stood an old man, bundled in a tattered coat. His face was gaunt, his cheeks hollow, and his gray beard was scraggly. He looked frail, like he hadn't eaten in days. "Please," the man said, his voice raspy and weak. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I'm homeless and I don't know where else to go. My heart sank. He looked so pitiful standing there in the cold. Mom walked over to the door and glanced at Dad. They exchanged one of those silent looks parents have, the kind that says everything without words. We can't just leave him out there, Mom said softly. Dad nodded reluctantly. All right, come in, he told the man, stepping aside to let him into the warmth of our home. The man smiled faintly, almost sheepishly, and shuffled inside. He seemed harmless enough, just another unfortunate soul down on his luck. Thank you, he muttered, glancing around our home as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Mom set a plate for him, and he sat at the table, hunched over like he didn't belong there. We all returned to our seats, though the atmosphere wasn't quite the same. I tried to eat, but I kept glancing at the man. His hands trembled as he shoveled food into his mouth, eating like he hadn't seen a meal in years. For a while, we just let him eat in silence. Then, far off in the distance, we heard it, a police siren. It wasn't unusual in Los Angeles, but something about the way the man stiffened caught my attention. His hands froze midair, and his whole demeanor changed. The faint smile he'd worn was gone, replaced by something darker. His eyes darted toward the front door. What's wrong? Mom asked cautiously. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat, and before we knew it, he pulled out a gun. My blood ran cold. He pointed it at us, his voice low but commanding. Nobody moves. Nobody opens that door. The room went silent. My dad raised his hand slowly, trying to stay calm. Look, we don't want any trouble. Quiet, the man barked. His voice was different now, sharp, menacing. He wasn't the frail, helpless man we'd let in. This was someone dangerous. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought he might hear it. My mom grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing it tightly. I could feel her trembling. Max wasn't at the table anymore. He'd gone to the bathroom a few minutes before the man had shown his true colors. I didn't dare look toward the hallway, afraid the man might notice, but I hoped Max had the sense to stay hidden. The siren grew louder, closer. The man's eyes flickered toward the door again. He was growing more agitated, his grip on the gun tightening. If anyone makes a sound, he growled, I'll... Before he could finish, a soft creak came from the hallway. My heart sank. Max, he must have moved, but I couldn't turn to see him. The man's head snapped toward the noise, and for a moment, I thought he was going to get up. Then we heard it, a faint click. The front door. Max must have managed to open it. The man's face twisted in fury, and he bolted toward the door. No, he yelled, but it was too late. As he yanked the door open, he froze. Standing there were two police officers, guns drawn. Yes. Drop it, one of them shouted. The man hesitated, his hand twitching as if he was deciding whether to shoot or run. But the officers didn't give him a chance. They moved in quickly, grabbing him and wrestling him to the ground. The gun clattered to the floor, out of his reach. The man let out a string of curses as they cuffed him. I finally exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath the whole time. Max peeked out from the hallway, his face pale but determined. One of the officers noticed him and gave him a reassuring nod. Good job, kid, he said. It was only after the man was hauled outside that we learned the full story. One of the officers stayed behind to talk to us, his tone serious but kind. You're lucky, he said. This guy's been targeting families on Thanksgiving. He robbed a family a few streets down tonight and held them at gunpoint during dinner. They managed to call us after he left, and we've been tracking him since. The officer glanced toward Max, who was now clinging to Mom's side. Your little brother probably saved all of you, he added. My hands were still shaking as I wrapped an arm around Max. You're a hero, I whispered, and for once, he didn't argue or tease me. He just nodded. Later that night, after the police left and the house finally quieted down, we sat together in the living room, too shaken to return to the dining table. The leftovers went untouched. I kept thinking about how close we'd come to something terrible, how easily the night could have ended differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that was terrifying. What would you do?
Hey y'all, it's me, the Money Professor, and everybody wants to know, what's an IUL? And I'm going to tell you. So this is you, this is your money. And on average, you take your money and you put it in the bank. And when you put your money in the bank, it's only going to grow at a whopping 0.01%, maybe a 0.001%. And while it's in the bank is loaning out your money, compounding your money, and making and keeping all of the money. And what you should do is take that money and put it into an IUL. And what's an IUL? It's an Index Universal Life Insurance Policy. So when your money's inside an IUL, it is protected and it's guaranteed to grow on an average of 8 to 10%. All right. And so when it's in those accounts, the account grows because it is growing on a compound or uninterrupted compound interest. And when it's protected, it's protected because it has a 0% floor, guaranteed no losses. Okay. So when the money is in that account, at the same time, it's growing cash value. And when you have that cash value, you're able to spend that money tax-free. You can use that money for leverage, such as, college funding, investing in property, or just other cash building assets. You can use that money as income replacement for retirement funding, or even build your own private bank, becoming your own family bank. And at the same time, it's a death benefit. It's a life insurance policy. So this death benefit, you are able to leave a legacy. It comes with living benefits for chronically ill or, critical illnesses. And also it's collateral. You are using this money to pay back this money when you are taking it while you're still alive. DM me more or hit the link in my bio if you are interested in creating your own IUL.
Did you know that setting aside as little as $300 from each paycheck into a max-funded IUL instead of a 401k can give you $610,000 tax-free money and will provide you with $60,000 a year tax-free in retirement? Comment IUL below if you want more information. If you're open to being a financial professional licensed in your state, please send me an email at essence@tenaciouscashflowacademy.com. Oh, hey y'all, it's me, the Money Professor. How are you? Well, I'm just, helping a client with some mortgage protection. What's mortgage protection? It's a life insurance policy that protects your family and your family's home in the event that you get sick, in a bad car accident, or just pass away before your mortgage is able to be paid off. This is the best way to keep your family and your home safe in the event that, like I said, you pass away. Mortgage protection policies are primarily term policies, and they last 10 to 30 years depending on your length of your mortgage payments. It also has the cheapest premiums, so it is extremely affordable for all homeowners, really. I personally believe everyone should know the power and benefits of having mortgage protection, as well as life insurance in general. The different kinds of life insurances that are offered and how important it is to have for you and your family. Feel free to send me a DM to learn about more opportunities and what's available for you and your family's protection. You can hit the link in the bio, complete the application, and I'll be in touch as soon as possible. Talk to you soon.
It was supposed to be a simple Thanksgiving dinner, just like any other. The table was set, as always, with Grandma's china and the old silverware we only use for special occasions. But when I looked at the faces around the table, they all seemed just a little too still, their smiles a little too tight. I sat next to my younger cousin, Claire, who had been unusually quiet all evening. I tried to start a conversation with her, but she just stared at her plate, her hand twitching near her fork. I was about to ask her what was wrong when she suddenly looked up at me, her eyes wide, almost pleading. "They're not real," she whispered, barely audible. I frowned, leaning closer. "What do you mean? Who's not real?" "Them," she said, nodding toward the rest of the family. "They're not really them." Before I could ask her to explain, the lights flickered. A strange chill ran through the room, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move behind my mother's chair. I looked again, but nothing was there. "Claire," I said, my voice shaking. "What do you mean, not real?" She opened her mouth to reply, but at that moment, my uncle who had been carving the turkey let out a sharp, strangled noise. We all turned to look, and for a moment, I thought he was choking. But then I saw it. His fingers were moving, twitching, not quite like a person. The knife slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor, and he stared down at his own arm, his face contorted in confusion. What's wrong with him? I whispered. Claire's voice trembled. It's happening again. I stood up, heart pounding, as the room around me seemed to grow colder, darker. I glanced at each of my relatives, and something shifted. Their smiles were too wide now, their eyes too hollow. They weren't quite right, they were too still, as if frozen in place, waiting for something. I grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her toward the door, but before we could move, the table groaned, the legs creaking as though something beneath it was pressing up, shifting. The turkey, that beautiful, golden turkey, slid across the table, its skin cracking open, revealing dark, rotting flesh inside. A voice, not my mother's but somehow like her, echoed through the room. Dinner's just beginning. I didn't look back as I yanked Claire into the hallway, the screams behind me rising, joining in a twisted chorus that didn't sound human. We ran through the house. But as we passed each door, the faces of my family peered out pale, distorted, their eyes empty, their smiles too wide. They were watching us. We finally made it outside, but the air was thick, suffocating. As we stumbled down the driveway, I turned around for one last look. The house was gone, just an empty field where it had been. The only thing left was the sound of the wind and the smell of turkey, and in the distance, faint voices calling our names.
Okay, that was pretty good. Good job, good job.
The scariest thing just happened to me. I'm home for Thanksgiving, so I was drinking my coffee, minding my business, when there was a knock on the door. The dogs are barking, a lot of commotion. I'm like, who the hell is that? So I go answer the door. It is 2 policemen. My heart sinks into my butt. I say, what seems to be the officer problem? They look at me and they go, we've got an alert. We've got an alert on a car. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm confused. They said, we've got an OnStar alert on a car. It's a gray Mini Cooper convertible. I'm like, that's my sister's car. At this point, I'm just confused. Where the fuck is my sister? I realized that I heard her talking on the phone this morning that she was going to go work out. So I'm like, I think she's at a workout. What is going on? And then it starts to sink in. If you got an alert on her car, why are you here? Is she dead on the side of the road? So I'm starting to freak out. I'm starting to cry. They're like, listen, girl, you gotta calm down. You gotta calm down because we don't know anything yet. Why don't you call her? I'm calling her. I am texting her. You think I haven't tried to do that, sir? She's not answering her phone. It's on silence mode or whatever it is. Don't disturb. I'm pressing notify anyway. No response. I call my dad over, tell him the situation. He starts freaking out too. The cops are like, guys, you both gotta calm down. We're like, we're gonna get in the car and go find her. And they're like, you don't know where she is. So we're calling the workout place, no answer. They finally answer. They're like, we have no record of her here. And I'm like, where is this bitch? I realized the day before her car had been serviced. So I'm like, oh my God, her car flipped on the freeway. There's no other explanation. That's what happened. Go to the freeway and find her. They're like, well, before we do that, why don't you call the other location of the workout place she goes to? So I call the other location. It's a little bit farther. So I'm like, why would she have gone there? I say, do you have Jana here? And they're like, oh yeah, she's in here working out. And I'm like, oh my God, this bitch. I say, I'm sorry, you gotta go grab her from the workout. She needs to come on the phone. So they go grab her from the workout. I know that she's probably freaking out why they're removing her from the workout. She gets on the phone. I'm still freaking out a little bit. I'm like, Jana, are you okay? We thought you were dead. She's like, I'm fine. What are you talking about? I go, the police are here. They got an alert on your car. We thought you were dead. She goes, well, tell them to leave. Bitch, you know the emotional damage you just caused me? I thought I was never gonna have another Thanksgiving again. She went back to the workout. She's not even home yet. Sisters. I'm gonna kill her when she gets home.
This fucking bitch.
I didn't do it.
I'm so confused though, because what alert that they received that it went to her, how and why did that even happen? And like, so what, the car just sent an alert and it went to the emergency car people and they sent it to the police and then they contacted this, like, good job, but it still doesn't make sense. Well, she got a Subaru.
The cursed Thanksgiving for the Martinez family. Thanksgiving had always been a cherished tradition. Every year they'd gather in the same rustic, creaky old family farmhouse, nestled deep in the quiet woods of Vermont. The house had been in the family for generations, filled with heirlooms, faded photographs and secrets from the past. It was a place of warmth, laughter, and love, until last year. The last time they'd all gathered, something changed. After Thanksgiving dinner, Aunt Maria found an antique box tucked behind a loose wall panel in the basement, as if it had been deliberately hidden. Curiosity got the best of them, and they pried it open. Inside was a yellowed, weather-beaten journal and a withered bundle of sage tied together with black thread. The journal belonged to Rebecca Martinez, a distant relative who had lived in the farmhouse in the late 1800s. Rumors said she'd practiced dark rituals to protect the family from the evil that lingers. As the family read her journal aloud, they uncovered chilling accounts of how she'd sacrificed animals and burned mysterious herbs to keep a dark entity at bay, an entity she called the Hollow. Rebecca's final entry read, "If you read this, it's because I have failed, or because curiosity has overcome my warnings. By opening this box, you have lifted the warding I placed upon our family. The Hollow is no longer bound." As the family sat around the living room, digesting the eerie words, a sudden chill swept through the house. The lights flickered, and the smell of burned tea filled the air. Then the door slammed shut. In the ensuing silence, they heard soft footsteps coming from the attic above. The family spent that night in terror as each room grew colder and darker, shadows deepening in every corner. That night, Uncle Leo vanished. When dawn broke, they found a note scrawled in his handwriting, filled with frantic, illegible words, ending with, "Forgive me, it's coming for us." They fled the farmhouse at first light, but the haunting didn't end there. Each family member began experiencing strange occurrences in their homes. Mirrors shattering without reason, whispers in the dark, and the pervasive feeling of being watched. It was as if something had followed them home. Now, a year later, they're all gathered again, not to celebrate Thanksgiving, but because Uncle Leo reappeared. He was found shuffling along the road near the farmhouse, wild-eyed and muttering about the Hollow. He begged them to return to the house, to perform Rebecca's ritual, to seal the entity back in. So, against their instincts, they gathered once more at the old farmhouse on a misty Thanksgiving night. As they huddled in the living room, the wind howling outside, Uncle Leo held the journal and recited the incantations. But halfway through, the lights went out, and a bone-chilling cold swept in. One by one, each member of the family felt an icy hand clasp their shoulder in the dark. And when the lights flickered back on, Aunt Maria was gone, her chair empty, only her voice lingering, a faint, terrified whisper, "Run!" Outside, they saw a figure, tall and hollow, lurking among the trees. The family ran, never looking back. And each year, when Thanksgiving arrives, they all receive a letter in the same handwriting, signed by Rebecca Martinez, with one ominous line, "The Hollow awaits you next Thanksgiving."
That was a good one, too. I like it.
Do you personally think that this was a case of self-defense? This is the shocking Thanksgiving story of Byron David Smith. 1 Minute Horror Special, episode 115. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. In 2012, Byron David Smith, a retired security engineering officer, resided in Little Falls, Minnesota, and was repeatedly burglarized. Frustrated by the break-ins, the 65-year-old set up an elaborate security system, including cameras to catch the culprits. On Thanksgiving Day of the same year, Smith, to make it look like he was not home, drove his car out of his driveway and positioned himself in the basement, armed with a rifle and revolver, waiting for intruders. 17-year-old Nicholas Brady and his 18-year-old cousin, Haley Kiffer, broke into his home. Smith, hidden in the basement, shot Brady multiple times as he entered the room, ultimately delivering a fatal shot once he fully tumbled down its stairs. Smith then dragged Brady's body to a workshop after uttering, "Oh, sorry about that." Later, when Kiffer descended into the basement, Smith shot her with a revolver, referring to her as the B word multiple times, and delivered a fatal shot to her head. After such, Smith said, "Cute. I'm sure she thought she was a real pro. They weren't human. I don't see them as human. I see them as vermin." Despite the gruesome events, Smith did not alert the police until the next day, justifying the delay by not wanting to bother them on Thanksgiving. During the investigation, Smith claimed self-defense under the Castle Doctrine, stating that he fired more shots due to Kiffer laughing at him, although no evidence of laughter was found. The Castle Doctrine is a legal principle that allows individuals to use force, including deadly force, to defend their homes or castles from intruders. On the other side, the prosecution argued that the killings were a premeditated ambush, citing Smith's actions as excessive and lacking genuine fear for his life. He received a life sentence without parole, currently being incarcerated at the Oak Park Heights prison in Oak Park Heights, Minnesota.
Damn, bruh. I mean, he messed up because he ain't called the police. You shoot him and call the police. He kept shooting, dragged him, shot him some more, waited for the other one, dragged that one, shot her, then chilled, said, oh, let them enjoy their Thanksgiving. Then called the police the next day. So yeah, he messed up. But he was fed up too, honey. He knew, like, they're coming back and this time I'm gonna be ready. Period. But rest in peace to them kids. Condolences to their families. That is a very sad situation, either way it goes. And yeah, that sucks.
True Thanksgiving horror stories from Killer Orange Cat. When I was 15, we had Thanksgiving dinner early at my grandparents' that year, about 2 p.m. Afterwards, I was beginning to feel a bit antsy, and I let my parents know that I was going to go explore the Hollow for a little bit. It'd been a while since I'd done so, and I didn't even think about asking my younger brother and sister if they wanted to go. After all, I like being by myself. I knew that I didn't have a lot of time to explore before it got dark, so I set out to make sure that I knew how far I could go and get back before the sun had set. I didn't do the greatest job at it, though. If you've ever been out exploring the woods, you probably know what I mean. You can easily get fascinated by the hills and the woods and lose track of time. And it got very, very dark before I got anywhere close to being back to the house. By the time I got back to the farm, it had been dark for at least an hour. I'd never been out by the barn when it was dark outside, and it looked incredibly creepy. Me being a teenage boy, I love creepy stuff. And a thought occurred to me that if the barn's creepy on the outside, it's got to be way creepier on the inside. So I decided to go explore it. Getting into the barn was simple. My grandparents rarely locked their door, let alone lock that barn. They lived in a really, really safe area where crime was pretty much unheard of. And the barn did have one of those really heavy wooden locks on it. I don't know what those are called, but I was able to pull up the wooden beam, and when I opened the door, it made a horrible creaking noise. I knew my grandparents had likely not been in that barn for years, so I was surprised I was even able to get the door open at all. I figured the hinges would just be rusted shut. As I mentioned, the barn was really old, and they never really used it that much, and if they did use it, it was during the daytime because the barn didn't have any lights in it. But thank God we lived in an era of smartphones, so I had a light on my phone. I turned my flashlight on and just marveled at the creepiness. If dark is creepy, then just a minor amount of light will make it much more creepier. I was fascinated by all the tools and so many sharp implements, most of which were hanging up. However, there was a small hatchet laying on the workbench. It was discolored, and on close inspection, I realized that it was coated in dried blood. I don't know much about slaughter animals, but I knew that my grandparents used to do it often, chickens and pigs and stuff. So I just figured the hatchet was used for that purpose, and they just never cleaned it off. The barn had a lot of hay up in the loft, too, so I decided to climb the ladder and check it out. When I was shining my light around, it reflected off something buried in the hay, and I was wondering if there was another tool or something there, so I went to go check that out, too. Going up over it, I began to move the hay, and I screamed when the empty eye sockets of a long, dead corpse were staring directly at me. I nearly fell backwards off the loft, and I quickly climbed down the ladder and ran back to the house to tell my grandparents and parents what I found. My father, who's a huge man, like Hulk Hogan size, went out to go check it out, and he confirmed it. My grandparents phoned the sheriff's office. The body apparently had been in the loft for about 3 years.
Wow.
It had several hatchet wounds on it, and the police told us that the cause of the hatchet wounds was that hatchet that I found on that bench.
Whoa.
Which means I not only found a dead body, but I also handled the murder weapon. But it wasn't nearly as disturbing as the realization that my grandparents had lived in that house for 3 years and knew nothing about a dead body being in their barn.
Right.
They also never solved the mystery of who it was or how it happened.
Wow.
The end.
Good job, good job, good job. These some great Thanksgiving stories. You reached the end of another video. I appreciate y'all time. I appreciate you spending Thanksgiving with me. Whether you celebrate it or not, it's always good to be thankful and grateful for what you have, what's in front of you. Be present. Love on your family. Love on your loved ones. Love those who love you. Your family does not have to be blood. Blood is not always who is good for you either. But, you know, just admit kindness, admit love, do it genuinely, do it intentionally. And be grateful for life, for love, and for family, and for prosperity, and just good people in general, okay? I know I am, and I mean that from my heart. But thank y'all for being here with me. Y'all are my soul tribe. Tribe is with a Y, because the Y is for you, and that's because I love you so freaking much. Yes, I do. Hit me in the links to get some insurance, to become an agent, to get some digital marketing, to upscale your social medias, whatever that may be. And yeah, give it to who? Your loved ones and your enemies, because anybody can get it, period. I say.